Good morning, students. I'm Dr. Subhadra, Assistant Professor, Department of Psychiatry. Today I'm going to present a detailed discussion on dissociative disorders. So, let's hop in. So, today we are going to see, this should be will be the synopsis. So, we are going to see in this order of introduction, prevalence, etiology of dissociative disorders, nosology, and how it's been classified, its screening and diagnostic schools, and different types of dissociation, as in dissociative amnesia, dissociative fugue, dissociative identity disorder, trance and possession disorder, and the phenomenology of depersonalization and derealization, functional neurological symptom disorder, and what is Ganser syndrome, and what are the psychological interventions possible for dissociative disorders. So, introduction. Dissociation can be defined as unconscious defense mechanism involving the segregation of any group of mental or behavioral processes from the rest of the person's psychic activity. According to the ICD-10 classification, dissociation has been defined as a partial or a complete loss of the normal integration between memories of the past, awareness of identity and immediate sensations, and control of bodily movements. However, the DSM-5 defines it as a disruption of and or discontinuity in the normal integration of consciousness, memory, identity, emotion, perception, body representation, motor control, and behavior. So these are all the general classification. So dissociation has been divided into dissociative amnesia and dissociative identity confusion, dissociative identity alteration, depersonalization, and derealization. The details of which will be seen in subsequent slides. So, how common is dissociative syndrome? So, you can see it in 1 per 10,000 10,000 people in the population. And in patient populations, it can be as high as 3%. So, although it has numerous subtypes, the most commonly diagnosed dissociative disorder is mixed dissociative disorder or other specified dissociative disorder category. That is in US or the non-Western countries. Whereas in developing countries like India, the most common diagnosed dissociative disorder includes dissociative trance and possession trance syndromes. Uh, Etiology, likelihood of etiology being physical and sexual abuse, especially when it happened in early childhood, leading to higher levels of dissociation in the adulthood. So, etiology. So, biologically, we have genetic predisposition when studies have been done, independent adoption studies, where they found out 50% of variants in dissociative symptoms. And there are certain genes that has been encoded, postulated, that is 5-HTT-LPR, COMT gene, PDNF also plays a major role. So, having known this, uh, the other possible genetic etiology include CAT haplotype, gene X environment, ADCY8 gene has also been postulated in the causation of dissociation. And the neurotransmitters involved include NMDA receptors, that is glutamate, GABA, serotonin, dopamine, endogenous opioids, norepinephrine, and acetylcholine. And there has been involvement of HPA axis as well. So sometimes it can cause both the hyperactive HPA axis could also cause the it could also be postulated in the etiology of dissociation. Even the blended HPA axis in case of chronic trauma can also cause dissociative symptoms and impairment of memory. So this defense cascade model depicts the various status of dissociation. So, and the involvement of the structures and the involvement of the various types of neurotransmitters involved. So, the brain areas which are involved are frontal limbic area. In the frontal limbic area, we have PFCs, amygdala, anterior cingulate cortex, temporal areas, and prefrontal cortex, hippocampus, limbic system, even thalamus and limbic system has also been implicated in various other types of dissociation. So, neuroimaging finding suggest in MRA, say for example, MRA, there has been almost around 20% smaller hippocampus area and around 30% smaller amygdala has been noted in such patients. On fMRI studies, these are the findings noted, that is increased activation in prefrontal cortex and parietal cortex during working memory tasks, hyperactivity in the frontal cortex, and inhibition of the amygdala, which is in the limbic system. And there's been noted a greater activation of the right occipital lobe, Brodmann areas 18 and 19 during peritraumatic association. So that's all about the genetic etiology or the biological etiology. Now coming on to the psychological etiology, we have certain psychodynamic theories. So according to Freud, depressed materials or sexual or aggressive conflicts arising during adipal phase of development. Under the influence of a stressor, the depression model fails partly or completely, leading to the formation of a conversion or dissociative symptom. Freud believed hysterical patients to be fixated at the phallic genital phase of psychosexual development. Certain unpleasant repressed material is converted to somatic symptom, leading to relief of anxiety in conversion. This is called as primary gain. And because of this relief from anxiety, patient is theorized to have something called as labilal indifference in spite of having a serious physical symptom. In the neurotic defense mechanism, a temporary but drastic modification of character or sense of personal identity to avoid emotional distress. It includes fugue states and hysterical conversion reactions. PPD, in cases of PPD, there will be a history of childhood sexual abuse, neglect, or trauma, often struggle with a fragmented sense of self. Defense mechanism to escape overwhelming emotions or emotion shut-off response. In the social etiology of dissociation, we have trauma. So trauma, which is very important and vital in case of the etiologic concern for dissociation. So trauma makes a person feels like an object, losing autonomy over their own body. Dissociation acts as a defense mechanism during such traumatic events or right after that. So the experiences includes out-of-body sensations and mental escape. It's very commonly seen in victims of sexual abuse, physical abuse, and assault. So that's it about the etiology. Now moving on to nosology, how it has been given in the classificative system. So starting from DSM-1, it has been mentioned as distinguish dissociative reactions from other reactions. So in DSM-2, it has been classified as dissociative conditions under the category of hysterical neurosis. And we have conversion or dissociative subtypes. So whereas in DSM-3, there has been categories. So different types of dissociative disorder. Say, for example, psychogenic amnesia, psychogenic fugue, multiple personality disorder, and depersonalization disorder. So the terminology of multiple personality disorder has been widely and widely used in DSM-3. So DSM-4 and TR, the names were changed specific to the dissociative nature. Say, for example, dissociative fugue, dissociative amnesia, dissociative identity disorder, etc. So coming on to the International Classification of Disorders, that is ICD, in 10, it has been classified under dissociative disorders among the neurotic, stress-related, and somatoform illness. In 11, however, it has been recategorized as dissociative neurological symptom disorders. In fact, the conversion disorders has been renamed as dissociative neurological symptom disorders. So yeah, this is exactly what is given in ICD-10. It's just a picture of this snap of that. Here, as we had already seen, the most common diagnosis is mixed or unspecified dissociative disorder. And according to the classification, what are the basic common differences between the current DSM-5 or ICD-11? So the dissociative identity disorder has been given in DSM-5, whereas here it is dissociative neurological symptom disorder and dissociative amnesia, similar in DSM-5 as well. So these are the other types given in ICD-11 and these are the other types given in DSM-5. This can be noted. So screening and diagnostic steps. So now the patient was there, the patient is here, history has been taken. Okay, so now we have classified and we have given the diagnosis. So, clinical diagnosis. So, how do we screen the patient? So, do we have any screening tools? The answer is yes. We do have screening tools. In fact, varieties of screening tools, starting from dissociative experience scale, adolescent dissociative experience scale. For children, you have child dissociative checklist and somatoform dissociation questionnaire. So, once you screen, if they turn out to be positive, then you can apply certain diagnostic tools as well. Say, for example, multidimensional inventory of dissociation, multi-scale dissociation inventory, clinician administered dissociative states, dissociative disorders interview schedule. Although dissociation has been uh, the primary modality of treatment diagnosis is clinical, but we have to know that we do have certain tools for screening as well as diagnosis. And then, okay. So in subsequent slides, we're going to see about the varieties of various types of dissociation disorder. So first, let's hop into know about dissociative amnesia. So it is around 2 to 6% common in general population. It's been the prevalence is equal in both the genders, and it arises from intolerable emotions of shame, guilt, despair, rage, and desperation. The primary etiology or conflicts over unacceptable urges or impulses, such as intense sexual, suicidal, or violent compulsions. Traumatic experiences such as sexual or physical abuse and betrayal. The general criteria for dissociative disorder must be met. So, for the diagnosis, general criteria for all subtypes, general criteria should be met. And in addition to that, there must be amnesia, either partial or complete, for recent events or problems that were or still or traumatic or stressful. And amnesia here is too extensive and persistent to be explained by ordinary forgetfulness or by intentional stimulation. So this is the diagnostic criteria for dissociative amnesia as per DSM-5. So how does the patient present? So the patient here presents with intercurrent somatoform or conversion symptoms. There could be alterations in consciousness, and there could be some phenomenology like depersonalization, derealization, trance states, the details of which will be explained in the upcoming slides. And there is spontaneous age regression in anterograde dissociative amnesia. Patient can even present with depression or even suicidal ideation and thoughts. Patient may have a past or family history of somatoform disorders or dissociative symptoms. Yeah, this slide depicts there are various other subtypes of dissociative amnesia. Includes localized, depending upon the inability to recall the events, it has been divided into localized, subjective, generalized, continuous, systematized. So, if you get a patient of dissociative amnesia, what else you have to keep in mind? What are the possible differential diagnoses? So, it could be you have to make an effort to rule out these possible closer DD. Say, for example, it could be a case of ordinary forgetfulness or sometimes called as age-related cognitive decline, even to that extent of senile dementia, vascular dementia, etc. Or it could be non-pathological forms of amnesia, especially in infantile and childhood amnesia or amnesia for sleeping and dreaming. Hypnotic amnesia do exist. Here, memory loss is less extensive. Or the closer disease could be dementia, delirium, and amnestic disorders due to certain other medical conditions, including Korsakoff psychosis, any stroke, perioperative, postoperative infections can even precipitate such can mimic this diagnosis, or even post traumatic amnesia. Seizure disorder can mimic, and any possible substance-related amnesia, including alcohol, sedative hypnotic agents, anticholinergic agents, steroids, marijuana, hyperglycemic agents, beta blockers, or even lithium glucoside, or can even have a close DD of transient global amnesia, in which there is general confusion, not to a particular event. In that case, you may not find any conflicts or history of trauma. So, what do you treat? So, pharmacotherapy, you have antidepressants and anxiolytics. Other treatment modalities includes, which I'm not going to say in detail because We'll see it in detail in the coming slides. So we can also use hypnosis, cognitive therapy, and group therapy. And then we have something called as dissociative, which is such an interesting phenomenon. So it is a sudden, unexpected travel away from home, from one's place of daily activities. Here, a person cannot recall some of or all of one's past. He may even assume a new identity, even with the change of name, place, person, everything. Usually for a few days, but occasionally for a long period of time. After the termination of use, the patient may experience perplexity or bewilderment or confusion, translate behavior, depersonalization, derealization, and conversion symptoms in addition to amnesia. Although there is amnesia for the period of fugue, the individual's behavior may appear completely normal to observer. It arises due to traumatic experience, as previously explained, or extreme emotions or impulses. So the diagnosis here is yes, of course, the general criteria. In addition to that, the individual undertakes an unexpected yet organized journey away from home or from the ordinary places of work and social activities, during which self-care is largely maintained. And there could be amnesia, partial or complete for the journey. So the differential diagnosis includes other types of dissociation, that is dissociative amnesia, dissociative identity, complex partial seizures, any case of bipolar affective disorder, schizophrenia, malignant. If you see the differential, it's very widely placed, starting from malignant schizophrenia to other types of dissociation. So how do you manage? Again, largely the management of dissociative disorder remains the same. That is, you treat the patient for the comorbid anxiety or depression with antidepressants. That is the most commonly prescribed agent being the SSRIs. And in the non-pharmacological management, you have hypnotherapy, family therapy, social interventions, and hypnosis to elicit any hidden stressor or conflicts or abuse in the past. So the next subtype, that is dissociative identity disorder. Here, there is a slight female preponderance is there. It is the subtype that is previously been called as multiple personality disorder. It is characterized by presence of two or more distinct identities or personality states. Symptoms of all other dissociative disorders are commonly found in patients with dissociative identity disorder as amnesia, fugue, depersonalization, and derealization. Here, the diagnostic criteria include two or more distinct personalities exist within the individual, one being evident at the time. So each personality has its own memories, preferences, and behavioral patterns, and it sometimes takes full control of the individual's behavior. So there is also inability to recall important personal information. And the fourth criteria being the other possible exclusions or not there. Say, for example, organic mental disorder, psychoactive substance should not be there. The symptoms are not due to any organicity or substances. So here the differential diagnosis for dissociative identity disorder or DID, you call it DID. So includes affective disorders or psychotic disorders, anxiety disorders too, and PTSD, personality disorders, neurocognitive disorder, seizure disorder, factitious disorder, malingering, other dissociative disorders, deep trance phenomena. The management generally includes, so you have to get the patient in a safe environment, stabilize the patient and symptom detection, and then you try to process the trauma and memory integration by various techniques like hypnosis, EMDR, talk therapy, abreaction therapy, and then you do something called as integration and rehabilitation. So it is the co-consciousness training, skill building, cognitive restructuring, and social reintegration. So we follow this for management of dissociative identity disorder. So, in another interesting phenomenon of dissociative trance and possession, in fact, this is the most common dissociation that is being seen in developing countries like India. I'm sure most of you people must have gone through or must have seen people having trance and possession states. So, what is that? So, it is the temporary marked alteration in the state of consciousness or with the loss of the customary sense of personal identity without the replacement by an alternate sense of identity. So, this is what exactly the difference between dissociative fugue and dissociative trance and possession. So, here there is no replacement of sense of identity. Whereas in fugue there is totally two different identities. Here, the individual exhibits stereotypical, culturally determined behaviors or experiences being controlled by the possessing entity. The amnesia here can be partial or full for the event. So again, the general criteria for diagnosis, the criteria should be met, the general one, and the following must be present. There should be trance, that is the temporary alteration of the state of consciousness shown by any of the following features. Two of the following features. Number one is loss of the usual sense of personal identity. Number two, narrowing of awareness of immediate surroundings. Number three, limitation of movements, postures, and speech. And that is for trance. And for possession disorder, the individual is convinced that he or she has been taken over by a spirit, deity, power, or other persons. So now coming on to depersonalization, derealization. So it has a 1 year prevalence of 19%. It is again more common in women. Depersonalization may be defined as a persistent or recurrent feeling of detachment or estrangement from oneself. Person may report feeling like an automation or watching himself in a movie. Whereas derealization refers to feeling of unreality or being detached from one's environment. So the patient may describe his perception of the outside world as lacking lucidity and emotional coloring, as though dreaming or dead. And this phenomena are similar to the so-called near-death experiences associated with moments of extreme danger to life. So here for the diagnostic criteria, so you have depersonalization symptoms, derealization symptoms, and there should be acceptance that this is a subjective, spontaneous change, not imposed by the outside forces or people. And the sensorium should be clear and absence of any toxic confusion state or any under the influence of any substance use. This is the diagnostic criteria according to DSM-5. The possible differential diagnosis, we have a varieties of differential diagnosis. In the neurological conditions, we have seizure disorders, brain tumors, post-concussive syndrome, metabolic abnormalities, migraine, vertigo, mania disease. Whereas in psychiatric conditions, you have panic attacks, phobias, PTSD, acute stress disorder, any substance intoxication, or even sometimes withdrawal symptoms can mimic symptoms of depersonalization or derealization. So the management, similar approach. Pharmacotherapy with SSRI, psychotherapy, including, psychodynamic, cognitive, CBT, supportive therapy, hypnosis. The other possible psychotherapy, psychological interventions being stress management strategies, distraction technique, reduction of sensory stimulus, relaxation exercises, and physical training. And then conversion disorder or something called as functional neurological symptom disorder. These are the isolated neurological symptoms that cannot be explained in terms of known mechanisms of pathology and in which there has been a significant psychological stressor. It is an illness or deficit that affect voluntary motor or sensory functions, which suggests another medical condition but is caused by psychological factors because the illness is preceded by conflicts or other stressors. Okay, these are the diagnostic criteria. Here, yeah, the general criteria should be met, and there should be no evidence of physical disorder. It must sufficient must be known about the psychological and social setting and personal relationship of the patient to allow a convincing formulation to be made of the reasons for the appearance of disorders. So the subtype of dissociative motor disorder with weakness or paralysis, and there could be variable degrees of incoordination, that is ataxia, may be evident, particularly in the legs, resulting in an abnormal bizarre gait or inability to stand unaided. It's typically called as astasia abasia or dissociative convulsions. Here, the patient can mimic epileptic seizures very closely in terms of movements, but tongue biting, serious bruising due to falling, incontinence of urine may not be there or it's very, very rare. And loss of consciousness, this is very important. Loss of consciousness is typically absent. So, dissociative anesthesia and sensory loss. Here, the anesthetic areas of skin often have boundaries. Sensory loss may be accompanied by complaints of paresthesia. This slide is very important, both clinically as well as for your exams point of view. So how do you differentiate a true seizure, true epileptic seizure from a dissociative convulsions? So true epileptic seizure has a stereotype, whereas such stereotypes is typically absent in case of a false seizure or dissociative convulsions. So like to name a few, incontinence of urine, injury, tongue bite, prodromal symptoms are typically present in a case of seizure, which is not there in case of, will not be there in case of dissociative convulsions. Speech, no verbalization during speech, but here the patient can speak. And duration typically lasts for 20 to 30 seconds, not more than that, in fact, 50 to 70 seconds. Here it can be prolonged. The patient can even start, having convulsions for hours together. And amnesia will be very complete. Here is partial. They can sometimes remember what happened during the event also. And other neurological signs usually present in epilepsy. It is not there in dissociative convulsions. And post-ictal confusion usually present here in true seizure, absent in partial seizure, pseudo seizures. EG findings, interictal findings will be abnormal, uh, generally normal in uh, false seizures. Serum prolactin is raised in post-ictal period. It is usually normal in case of false seizures or dissociative convulsions. So these are different types of dissociative motor disorder. You just check your note. Okay, what are the DDs? So again, varieties of DDs including dementia, brain tumors, myasthenia gravis, polymyositis, MS, optic neuritis, Guillain-Barré syndrome, even the neurological manifestation of AIDS. In psychiatric disorders, we have somatization disorder, hypochondriasis, pain disorder, sexual dysfunction, factitious, and malignant disorder. Management, same. SSRIs and hypnosis and psychodynamic psychotherapy and other varieties of psychotherapy. Ganser syndrome. It is characterized by giving approximate answers together with clouding of consciousness, and it is frequently accompanied by hallucinations and other dissociative symptoms. The hallmark of Ganser syndrome is a symptom of passing over the correct answer for a related but incorrect one. Patient gives erroneous but comprehensible answer. Under ICD-10, it's been classified under other dissociative disorders. So the deities of Ganser syndrome includes dementia, depressive pseudodementia, confabulation of Korsakoff syndrome, organic dysplasias, and reactive psychosis. Treatment, there's been no systematic treatment studies have been conducted. Studies have been done for the treatment. So basically, just follow the same protocol, that is exploration of stressors. The hypnosis can be tried to reveal the hidden stressor, and you can try low dose antipsychotic agents. So psychological interventions. So when will you admit such patients? What are the indications of inpatient therapy? So when there is a possible risk of persistent and severe suicidal ideation there, then you admit the patient. When there is a risk of self-injurious behavior or risk of harm to others is present, or when there is a diagnostic clarification is present, or when for the management of acute crisis situations in patient's life, or when there is comorbidities requiring intensive monitoring and treatment, or when the patient is not responding to the routine treatment or non-adherent to the OPD management. And for the development of skills and coping strategies, you consider admitting the patient under a hospital sickness, inpatient sickness. So in general, you teach something called as distress tolerance, emotional regulation. This largely you follow to increase the coping skills of the patient. Do something called, these are the mechanisms: self-soothing, distraction techniques, opposite action, and increase the emotional awareness of the patient, mindfulness, teaching mindfulness. Because generally the tools to aid grounding oneself in the present moment is by giving meditation, breathing, use of grounding rock, etc. And crisis plan. It is a plan ready in case one's fail or one in case of any acute emergency. There are other interventions as well, like interpersonal skills. Here the mnemonic is Dear Man technique, basically for assertive communication, which includes you describe the situation, express your feelings, assert your needs very, very clearly, reinforce why it benefits both the parties, and stay focused, that is, be mindful about it and appear more confident and try to negotiate a solution. And EMDR, this technique, that is eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. So it is also called as trauma desensitization. Here, moving eyes left to right while recalling a traumatic memory, it helps the brain processes trauma in a non-threatening way. And it also involves cognitive restructuring. So it replaces negative trauma beliefs, that is, I'm powerless, with adaptive thoughts such as I'm survived, I'm strong. So you combine both these techniques in case of EMDR, that is bilateral stimulation, wherein you move your eyes left to right, and cognitive restructuring. It is replacing negative thoughts with the positive adaptive thoughts. Hope that's clear. So largely, so largely, uh, to put it in a nutshell, so dissociative disorders, uh, you try to elicit possible trauma history. The trauma could be in the either in the childhood or in the near past. The childhood abuse, the abuse being it could be physical abuse or sexual abuse, psychological abuse, or there could be a history of childhood neglect. Okay. And then the patient can have multiple different types of dissociative disorders, starting from dissociative amnesia, dissociative identity disorder, dissociative use disorder, dissociative conversion. Okay. And then you apply certain screening tools and diagnostic tools. And then you also have a close reading. You also keep the differential diagnosis of varieties of illness. Say, for example, starting from comorbid depression, comorbid anxiety, dementia, and possible organic etiology. And in all the possible cases, you have to rule out any involvement of substance use or any organicity. And the treatment mainly consists of two modalities, that is pharmacological management and non-pharmacological management. In pharmacological management, you have to treat the comorbid anxiety and comorbid depression, or comorbid suicidal ideation in case the patient presents with. And so you try to give antidepressant, the most common antidepressant described being SSRIs. And secondly, you do something called as non-pharmacological involvement intervention or the psychological interventions. Here you try to do a technique called as hypnosis. The hypnotic agents or varieties of hypnotic agents can be used, say, for example, uh, thiopental sodium or lorazepam. So under hypnosis, you try to elicit the hidden stressor, any possible stressor in the past, after which you can do varieties of therapy, namely uh, psychodynamic psychotherapy, supportive psychotherapy, family therapy, group therapy. And in addition to that, you also try to do mindfulness therapy, and you also try to focus more on increasing the coping skill of the person. So, under very few circumstances, there could be a need to admit the patient under hospital. When in case of harm to self, harm to others, or when the comorbid illness is very severe enough for you to admit the patient, so you consider admitting. In general, the prognosis is guarded, I would say, once because the patient would be requiring therapy, long-term therapy. In addition to the pharmacological treatment, the main focus of treatment is non-pharmacological. So, however, being said, the elicitation of trauma plays a major role. So you elicit a trauma history and then you work on it. So it is a long shot. So that's it about the dissociation disorder. Out of all the important, for exam point of view, you might require to read about the different types of dissociation, and you have to know about the phenomenon of depersonalization, derealization, and you have to know about Ganser syndrome and the slide depicting the difference between, that is the slide, difference between true seizure and pseudo seizures. People will ask you, and in general, the management, as I covered it extensively. So hope that helps. With that, let me wind up with this session. Hope you understood. So these are all the references I took. Thank you so much.